Hello and welcome to this lesson on misleading charts and graphs. Well, what does the word misleading mean? To mislead is defined as causing someone to have the wrong idea or impression about something. And you can probably see from these pictures what I mean by misleading charts and graphs. You can spot probably that there's something wrong with this chart here. We've got two money bags and one is considerably bigger than the other, and yet we've got a scale going up in 20s here, so it's not clear what's going on here. And you can see here that this lady perhaps is talking about sales figures that are skyrocketing here, whereas perhaps their competitors' line graphs are somewhere down here. So why is it important to look at misleading graphs and charts? Well, I want you to be able to, in the future, when a company or advert presents you with a chart or graph, I want you to be able to look at it with a critical eye and decide if you think you're being given accurate and reliable information. Now, you might be thinking, well, why would someone want to draw a misleading graph or chart? Well, let me show you some examples and then you might find out why. So here you can see a line graph, and in the heading at the top it says train price increases have tripled over the last decade. And yeah, you can see an incline in the graph here. It's going up, that's for sure. But in so much as tripled, well, okay, it's going from 1 to 3, but this is just a percentage point per each point on the graph here. But yeah, the graph is definitely going up, but we'd have to look a little bit deeper to see whether it tripled. But what happens if I now present you with the same data, but on a slightly different graph? So this is exactly the same data, but it's just shown on a slightly different graph. Can you spot what's different about the graphs? Well, the key is in the vertical axis here and the scale. The scale here is going up by 0.5% each time. And what that does is it accentuates this increase in the line here. Whereas if the scale only goes up in 5s, you can see all those little percentage points would only be here between 0 and 5. And so actually this graph shows a slight but steady rise over the last decade. So you might think, well, what's the point in this? Well, for example, somebody who wants to show that train prices have increased massively might choose to draw this graph. Whereas somebody who might want to say, well, actually, oh no, I don't want to say that. I just want to show that they've increased, but I don't want to show that it's a dramatic increase. They might draw a graph like this. And you might be able to think about which two people or different groups or organisations might want to do that. It might be in the interest of the train company, for example, to show this graph, because they might not want to show that prices have increased that much. Whereas a passenger who perhaps is frustrated by a train price increases might show this graph and say, look, it's gone up massively. So there are two examples. What about this one? It says the bar chart shows the level of support for a new high-speed rail link. The government claims that this provides convincing evidence that people are in favour of the plans. Explain why this bar chart is misleading. We'll have a think for a few moments. Well, you can see that you've got the number against and the number in favour here of this high-speed rail link. But let's have a look at the scale. We've got 6,900 up to 7,200. Okay, that's not too much of a a difference in numbers there. But actually, at first glance, this bar chart looks like there's at least double in favour, doesn't it? Because you've got here 2 blocks, and here you've got 4 blocks going up the bar chart. So it looks like double the amount of people are in favour. But in actual fact, only 200 more people are in favour. Okay, so how have they done this? Well, they've done the scale going up in 100s for a start. And they've broken the scale. We talked about a little bit about this last week. They've broken the scale, and that's okay. But it's just that you've got to be aware of it. If that's been done, then it means that some numbers are missing. Okay, and they've started at a different point. And by starting at that different point, it then enables them to make their scale go up in only hundreds, and therefore it means that they can display it like this and make it look like there's almost double in favour. But it's just something that you should be aware of in the future, that this is the kind of thing that can be done. And I want you to be able to look at these things with a critical eye and think, actually, there's only a 200 person increase here, not double as the graph might suggest. Let's have a look at another example. Somebody who was frustrated perhaps with house prices soaring might look or draw a graph like this, where you can see, according to the bars here, that there's a massive house price increase. Well, at least that's what the bars suggest. But again, if we look at the scale, we can see actually, yes, there's a £10,000 increase here between house prices in year 1 and year 2, but the scale makes it this gap in the bars accentuated. Okay, so that makes it look like the house prices are soaring a lot more. Whereas if you do a scale here going up in 50,000 increments, then you can see actually the bars don't have a huge amount of difference. So somebody might be, well, like, actually, hang on, this is what's going on with house prices. It's not that much. So you can see it all depends on the scale. A supplier of Nutty Oats muesli claims that it provides more fibre than 3 rival brands and uses the bar chart to support this claim. Give 2 reasons why this diagram is misleading. Well, firstly, with a bar chart, all the bars need to be the same width. Okay, you can understand here that if Nutty Oats muesli is the person drawing this graph, then you can understand why they might want to make their bar the biggest to make it stand out. But with bar charts, you can't do that. Every single bar has to be the same width. So that's one problem, the bars are not the same width. But another problem is that there's no scale here at all, so we've no idea the numbers in terms of the amount of fibre. We don't know any, the amount of grams or a percentage or anything. Got no scale here. So that's 2 things going on with that graph. Okay, so let's have a look at how we could do this. How could we draw some graphs, one to be misleading and one to be more representative? Well, here's an example. A company spent a lot of money on an advert advertising their product. They want to show how the advert has boosted sales. Draw 2 graphs, a misleading graph and a more representative graph. So here are the months that they gathered their data over: December, January, February, March, April and May, and the sales figures in thousands. So in December they made a profit of 80,000, in January 2020 82,000, and so on. So they could draw a graph a bit like this if they wanted to show that they boosted sales. So you can see here there's a break in the scale, which is okay to do. You can do that. It doesn't necessarily make the graph misleading, just as long as you're aware that there's a break in the graph. But it's the scale that makes the line pronounced. Okay, I've gone up in ones here on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis you've got the time frame, the months of the year there. So you might think, oh yeah, they can make this claim. our advert has really worked, our sales have soared. But what happens if you plotted the graph slightly differently? What happens if you did it like this? Yeah, it shows an increase, but not quite to the extent that you've got going on here. This looks like a massive rise in sales. Whereas this one's a little bit more of a gentle rise. So what have I done differently on this graph? I've gone up in 2s instead of 1s like I have over here. So that's one way that you can make graphs misleading and more representative. Okay, I'd now like you to have a go at worksheet 16. When you've finished, take a photo and put it into class notebook under photos of your work. If you want more of a challenge even after that, then have a go at this extension. Statistics in the press. So the word press there just means basically newspapers and magazines. So it says, look through newspapers and magazines to find as many statistical diagrams as you can. Make a display to show the variety of diagrams used in the press. What types of diagram are most common? How effective are the diagrams in showing the information? Are any of the diagrams misleading? If they are, explain why. So that's an extra challenge if you want it. Good luck.